Benjamin can have love for the truckie. Beautiful minds, but we love getting ugly. Risk takers with a clover, man, we love getting lucky. You run, we chase fire, I love when it ducks me. Tones go off, house watch, read the address out. 1075, get up off the magic couch. 500 gallons prepared for the baddest drought. Who else you want on the way when disaster's out? Can't even get a little bit rattled when you enter with exit apparel. Mayday, member down, they'll drag you. You won't get this from every Tom, Dick, and Harold, but here's a view from the top floor with Mickey Farrell.
Welcome back, guys. This week I have Bob Pressler back on the show, this time diving into an article that he wrote for Fire Engineering back in 1997 titled Roof Operations, Lightweight Trusses and Variations. Now, this is a topic that's been debated for years, it's often misunderstood, and it still causes a tremendous amount of confusion in today's American fire service. Bob breaks it down, he clears it up in only the way that he can with a clear, direct, and honest approach from experience. So stick around. Listen to what Bob has to say about the dangers of operating on lightweight and truss roofs. Again, thanks for the support. Please like, subscribe, and share the new channel. Without any further ado, Bob Pressler talking about his opinions on roof operations while operating a lightweight construction. All right, Bob, thanks again for joining me on the show. Today I want to talk about an article from 1997, Roof Operations, Lightweight Truss and Variations. You did this for Fire Engineering on June 1st, 1997. It's an article that covers different lightweight roof assemblies, lightweight steel trusses that have minimal fire resistance, explains gypsum decking, and it addresses wood truss and engineered lumber roof systems. So what made you write this article back in 1997?
So back then, I was trying to cover a lot of different variations and a lot of different subjects, and it seemed like flat roof operations, no one really was talking about them. They're scared to go out on them. So I had done articles on flat roofs, and then I started to look at some of the different variations. And I had gone to a fire in the Bronx that had a gypsum roof. And at the time, I didn't know what a gypsum roof was. So that led to some investigation. And, just continued to look at different variables when it comes to not your normal built-up tar paper, gravel, plywood roof.
How big of a concern in the mid to late 90s was trusses back then?
They were just becoming prevalent. And, at the time, most of the work in New York City was good old, 2x12s, 3x12s, good roofs. You didn't have to worry about it. But I was living out in the suburbs, and we had some there. And then I moved upstate New York, and the newer houses up here were getting them. So they've become the easier way to build. So they've become much more of a problem.
We talk about truss roofs and how dangerous they are operating, but go into a couple of the details of why it is dangerous for firefighters to be operating on the roof of a truss building.
So when you look at wood trusses, it's all based on how they're put together. So the original ones were the gang nail trusses, where they had a piece of metal that they perforated the metal that went into the wood. And what the tests have shown is that as the metal heats up, the little pieces of metal that go into the wood heat up, the wood chars, they end up popping off. Whether it's the weight of the assembly pushing down on them, but the plates come off and then the truss will fail. Especially when it would be the bottom cord that was holding up the entire truss. If the top plates popped off, if there was no, side to side stress on the truss may not fail. So I have photos of that where all the top plates are gone and the roof is standing, the truss is still there, which kind of shot that, if one piece fails, they all fail. So that was the original. And then we've moved on to wooden I-beams and all the others. But when you look at the lightweight stuff for metal, it was the rolling bar joists. Those were pretty interesting because when we got into them, we realized that the spacing on those could be 4 to 6 feet, tremendously long spans, normally covered with Q decking, which is the most prevalent, but then some gypsum. But the Q decking, metal plates, they don't have to end on a truss. They could be supported on one end and tack welded to the two on either side of it, or clips. So it made it a pretty dangerous place to be up there operating on. And on top of it, if it's the rear of a store, rear of an office building where there's no ceilings, it has no fire rating. As soon as heat starts to get to it, it starts to weaken and fail. So there was an article in Firehouse magazine, again, long time ago, of a Kmart store somewhere in Pennsylvania. And as the companies were coming down, the fires through the roof in the rear, where there's no protection, no ceilings, fire immediately exposed to the truss. The trusses were already dropping, fires through the roof. And at the front of the store, people were still going in the shop. Because there, where there were ceilings, where there was protection between the front and back by a wall, they had no indication the building was already on fire.
Yeah, so that main concern you were saying about how it's tack welded together and that Q decking ends before the next joist, that's an issue when we're cutting up there, because you could cut through that gap where it's overlapped when it has no support.
You're on an unsupported piece that could just drop. So for a while they were talking about cutting triangles so that there was no true edge. You know, the biggest thing is most times they're cutting nowhere near the fire. So the few fires I've been to where the fires have been in those buildings, when you got to the roof is already sagging. So in order to go out to cut over the fire, it's kind of meaningless. Because if you go out there, you will make a hole, but it's not going to be with your saw. It's going to be you. We get cold smoke fires in these buildings because of sprinklers. There's no way to vent them. Maybe no skylights. Maybe we're going to cut defensively. So there are ways to operate on it, but there's just things we have to be aware of when we're up there.
That triangle concept, you're cutting small triangles at this point, so you're not getting a true vent. I mean, we're cutting for vents.
Yeah,
so
they were cutting
it's pretty much an obsolete cut.
4 foot on side. But what they were claiming is that as long as you didn't stay parallel to either set of walls, you weren't going to be anywhere where you'd leave an unsupported flat, more or less. It would be rigid. The piece would drop in or you'd pull it, and there'd still be substantial edges. I don't know if I agree with it. Never saw it out of fire. That was just someone coming up with something. Maybe we could do this.
Well, that's what you just said. Anytime I've seen any of this work, it's on a drill site, not the fire ground. And I think we're getting lucky with these drills is that they are going through it because there's no urgency. They're just drilling. They're making cuts. Even then it's dangerous because I don't think they understand fully the scale of what they're doing. I have not seen this successful on the fire ground because most fires that you would be cutting this roof for, it's a smaller fire within that store. And that vent is going to do nothing. It's remote from that fire. So I think we've got lucky over the years. Any fire that is impinging on that roof, where most times when we cut a taxpayer, you know, we're venting that store. This, you're not venting the store. We're not having fire impinging on that roof. So, again, I think that we go back to when we go to the roof and not go to the roof. We're programming young firefighter robots to make decisions at fires that aren't necessarily supposed to be made.
And they've also left out a valuable step where skylights. You know, there could be skylights that are going to give you a better indication of the conditions underneath you. Using the returns if there are skylights, if there is a ceiling. But the bigger problem is, I think, is that they're going up to cut with no indication of what the roof is. So depending on your weather, now, you know, when I wrote that article, I talked about 2-3 inches of insulation. Well, I had a friend bring me a chunk of insulation. It came off the school. That was at least 12 inches of insulation. So you start cutting and you're not even getting a clue of what's going on to the surface below you. So the more that they advance what they consider their building components, more insulation, different roofs, membrane roofs, it's still on an unsupported system. And that's the part they have to realize. You know, you go to a tilt-up building, the only place that's going to have a ceiling anywhere in the tilt-up is going to be the office area. Everything else is exposed. A rack fire that gets up to that roof level, that roof's going to come in. It's just a matter of time. And you go strolling out there. The one thing we do talk about is roof deck fires versus fires underneath the roof. So that comes into play too. You know, the fire comes up either from a machine or through a vent. It lights the underside of the roof on fire, sometimes heated from just below. And in the grooves of the Q decking, that fire starts to burn. And what happens is the fire is now burning the underside of the tar membrane, whatever kind it is. It's dripping into the channel and it's running the channel. Well, it's safe to operate there because you're standing above the trusses. The fire is really between the Q decking and the roof surface. So it's just a lot of cutting and pulling of the tar. It's not really cutting the roof at all.
And another problem with this fire is, like you were saying, how that roofing material is exposed in the rear of these stores. Now we have lithium-ion battery bikes that are exploding in these back rooms, pushing fire at force into these cockloft's. If it's wood frame or if it's the steel trusses, I think that all the numbers we're using for time of collapse in these buildings, they're all void now because these fires are burning so quickly and so fast. It's rapid fire pressure into the cockle-off area. That's going to change the game moving forward about sending guys to the roofs, even on regular taxpayers that aren't lightweight construction. We're getting fires on arrival, cockle-off front to rear, because that bike is being stored in a storage room. It's failing. It's exploding up into the cockle-off, pressurizing that cockle-off with the high volume of heat and fire. And then we're pulling up within seconds, having fire throughout the cockle-off.
Yeah, and that's something that's going to have to be looked at. You know, the other thing that I've noticed watching some of the videos that are online, seems to take longer to get those saws up on the roof. One of my first good roof fires was in Brooklyn in an auto body shop, and we had 4 saws running on that roof. And it was one of the scariest roofs I was ever on because it was nighttime and all you could hear is saws all around you. You couldn't even see them, you know. But if there's a delay in that roof ventilation, if there are no skylights, if it's solid roof, if you can't get a hole, yeah, we're going to be way behind it, you know, way behind that 8 ball. So it's imperative for that first roofman to get up there and give that kind of report. You know, is the smoke pushing out of pressure on all sides of this building? Would I pass going up the ladder, you know, where it's coming out around the roll down gate, around the sign on the front? Those are all indication of how much pressure is inside that building, right? And if it looks like it's getting ready to blow the sign off the front of the building, it's like you said, it's probably the cockle-off front to rear. And that's where the, you know, poking a hole as soon as I get in the store, taking a look, might be the thing to do. Yeah, the fire's already here. Most of the fires do start in the rear. So if you're showing it at the front, it's probably the whole cockle-off.
And another thing with the cockle-off fire, not to get off track talking about taxpayers, but a misconception is the word inspection hole. When we get to the roof of a taxpayer, just go cut the rear of the store. Stop wasting time with popping inspection holes looking for the fire. Like you said, most fires start in the rear. Get to the rear, get that hole, get that cockle-off open, push down, get that store vented so the engine company can make the push. I think we have to be careful when we're teaching young firefighters what the word inspection hole means and when to use it.
So many years ago, I was asked to review roof tactics for a pretty good-sized city. And that was their first thing. You come off the ladder, you put a hole in the roof. Tells you what the conditions are, tells you what the roof is made of, and then you proceed to do them. And I think it was every 15 feet or whatever their number was. And they're like, what do you think of that? And I go, well, all you're doing is bringing the fire to you. One of those holes, they're totally inefficient vent holes, but they're vent holes nonetheless. And you will draw the fire. So a misconception, again, flat roof taxpayer. Is it really flat? Right? Most times it's a little bit sloped to the rear. So when it rains, the water doesn't run off the front of the building onto people coming in the shop. So if fire's starting in the rear, once it hits the underside of the roof, it's uphill. And that's another reason we get the rapid fire spread. So like you said, get to the rear. Well, where in the rear? Depending on the depth of the store, if we couldn't figure out exactly where, we were always 20 feet off the rear, start cutting. You're going to find it. Yeah. It's going to come to you, right? But you got to start something. You got to get that hole in.
Getting back to lightweight trusses and variations, let's talk about gypsum roof and why they fail so quickly, the dangers of that, and how as firefighters we can size up when we see these and then the decisions to be made after we find them.
So the gypsum roof, like I said, my first exposure to it was a fire way down in the South Bronx in a commercial building. It was a waste paper warehouse. And they actually... I was there taking pictures, and a guy was bringing down a piece of it. He had a couple pieces, so he ended up giving me one. And that was what was called a gypsum pour. So a gypsum pour is that they put a flat roof of whatever they decide to use, and this is where it gets a little dicey, but they run some wire, and then they pour the concrete. It's a mix of Portland cement and gypsum. And they float 4 to 6 inches of this mixture, and that's what makes the gypsum pour. That was kind of expensive, and it was a little tough to do. They had to have something that was strong enough to hold up the pour. So they went to planks. The planks are in our books now, or were at least, where the same thing. They don't have to be any continuous length where they can end on the adjoining 2 planks and they're held in by clips. So the tell when you're up there, when you go to start to cut, it's just like passing a crew working on the interstate when they're cutting the concrete and there's a big cloud of dust. When you start cutting gypsum plank, that's exactly what you get. Either one of the gypsum roofs. you'll get a pretty good cloud of dust. And the problem is the weight. It's gypsum. It's partly Portland cement. So it's almost like a concrete roof.
So a telltale sign when we are operating the roof, the second you drop that blade in, you see a powder. That's an urgent message. You want to let everyone know.
Sure, and
to get off that roof.
Now we're back to the original thing we talked about. What are the conditions? Well, the one I saw was a scrap paper warehouse. So there wasn't a ton of fire. It was deep seated. It was smoky as all get out. So they were able to get up there and cut because the fire was basically a smoldering pile of rags, you know. So they cut and they got a hole and they got smoke out of it, but the fire itself wasn't there. But yeah, if I pull up to a place and it's chugging or rolling out real heavy, they get the overhead doors and there's an indication of a real good fire in there. As soon as I see that, I have to radio command, tell them, you know, this is a gypsum roof. We're coming down. And I'm sure people are going to say, no, we can stay up there. We can cut. Well, yeah, you can. You can also fall with it.
And again, going back to how effective really is that cut going to make on the impact of that fire? Probably not that much if it's a bunch of rags burning, if it's room and contents. That impact, I don't like to use the word risk versus reward. I don't really believe in that term, but this is a great example of like what is the risk and really what are we gaining by doing this tactic. Let's talk about the lightweight row frames. Those were all over the Bronx when I was up there, and we had, our rule was we pull up, content fire, top floor fire, we'll go up, we'll get the natural vents if we can, and then we're getting down right away. We had rows of them though, so for the OV getting to the rear with the portable, that was a tough move a lot of times, or just getting to the rear in general. So I like the idea, if it wasn't out every window on the top floor, you get up there, you shoot to the rear, you take a look on the building, get over, take a look, see what's going on in the rear, and then you can size up by looking at the adjoining building where some of those natural vents are, and then make that quick tactical decision. Okay, am I going to get on that roof? Am I going to get the natural vents? I'm going to get off quickly.
I think one of the things that has happened, that from the beginning of trusses, it was if one truss fails, they all fail. We've learned that that's not true. You know, the only one where that's probably true is a bowstring truss, because when one goes, it pulls the other ones. Whatever roof is still intact pulls those off their moorings. So you'll get a lot of that to fail, maybe the whole roof. But in lightweight truss, unless there's the exact amount of fire and weight in one spot, this one falling isn't going to pull these next four down. As the fire continues, they're going to continue to fall. So, you know, we fight quite a bit of fire right now in truss roofs, especially if the section over the main staircase is gone. There's nothing left to fall on you, right? So when you look at the roof operations, if these are newer buildings, they probably have sheetrock, right? So sheetrock on a good day is going to give us, 20 minutes. If I pull up and it's blowing out every window on the top floor, my 20 minutes are probably gone. So now I have to do what you're saying. I have to take a pretty quick observation of what it looks like. Is there a skylight? Has the skylight blown on its own? Is it pushing out over around the scuttle cover? Not through it, but around the seam around it, indicating that, you know what, it probably is in that cockloft because it's pushing out seams. It's pressurized everything. Something I talked about years ago, too, and a lot of people never got the concept. You got fire in a first floor apartment. So it came out the windows. They get the glass, they knock the fire. They take the glass on the second floor. They got some smoke pushing out of the second floor. So you're curious if it's got a truss floor. So where's one of the places you can look? I would look between the two sets of windows in that blank area because that's where the truss loft is. So if it's pushing out of the siding between my two windows, there's a fair chance it's in the truss loft because it's pressurized smoke, right? They've got the windows top and bottom. All the good smoke is coming out. But boy, right in line with that one window, it's pushing pressurized smoke through the siding. The only thing between the two sets of windows is the floor trusses. So that truss loft might have fire in it. But yeah, the top floor, if it's in there, you're going to have to make that decision. Can I get out there and get a quick hole? But I go back to, is it pushing front and back? What are all those variations that you have?
Going back to operating on that roof in the bowstring truss, is when one fails, the others do not fail. So a tip that was passed on to me many years ago, right, was when you run parallel the bearing walls and opposite from front to rear. So if you have the bearing walls here and one starts to fail, don't run towards the side, run to the front or rear.
Facing on a bowstring truss 20 to 25 foot, right? So when one drops, you're going to get 40 to 50 foot of roof to follow it. And there's tons of pictures around that show after the fire, bowstrings laying upside down. And what they were pulled off their moorings. When that middle one dropped, whatever roof decking was still around pulled the adjoining trusses in. And then they sat like that. There was some from a car dealership in New Jersey years ago that showed it perfectly. The burned away one, what was left of it, and then you could see in the background ones turned upside down that were pulled off their moorings.
Another good size up. I always talk about internalizing your size up. If you pull up to a building and you're not quite sure if it is a truss building, a lightweight building type construction, if you go to the building right next door, you could go in, open up that ceiling, see what you have. If you have a lightweight condition, well, that's a game changer for the fire then. You know, if you open it up, you see some lath and plaster, well, then we're going to have some fun, right? We're going to go up there, we're going to pull a ceiling, we're going to cut our roofs. But if we do figure out that this is more than a room of contents, and you pull up and it's going pretty good, and you're not quite sure, just go inside and internalize that size up, and that'll dictate what you're doing next as far as your positioning.
Sure, it gives you one more clue. You know, like I said a little bit ago, the problem with the trusses is they've become, well, we don't fight fire in truss buildings. Well, we can, but there's a lot of things we have to, think about and apply. And some people don't. As soon as you say room and contents, oh, it's out two windows, that's more than room and contents. Well, it still could be one room. And like I said, we get 15 to 20 minutes on drywall if it was put in right to give us some kind of indication. I get there, the windows had just dropped and the room just got to flash over. That ceiling's good probably for another 10 minutes. If we don't get any water on it, I might have a chance to get up there. But if it's pushing out the three front windows, fire, and it's already pushing out the cracks where the roof level starts, it's probably into that cockloft. And if you suspect those to be, truss buildings, they're a lot harder to go up and operate on.
From the late 90s to where we are today, I don't think we've made much improvement with fighting these fires in lightweight construction, and we have more and more of it. But people want to fight back on it and say, well, the safety police this, the safety police that. We can cut these roofs. We've gotten very lucky operating on these roofs, and when we're cutting them, that more firemen haven't died across the country over the past recent years, because more and more with social media, you're starting to see people drilling on this and really pushing and promoting the sense that we can cut roofs that are made lightweight or whatever it may be. And I think we're setting ourselves up for failure in the future because, again, we're not getting pushed to the test of cutting these in real time on real fire. Most times it's on a training ground, and we've gotten lucky even on the training ground. I feel like when you see people doing this, I'm cringing like, oh my God, these guys are going to fall to the roof just cutting this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we've made much progress, though, from when you wrote the article on 97 to here we are in 2025. I think we're almost going backwards.
So I think the biggest thing is that most places, again, you always have to quantify this, they're getting called to their fires a little bit quicker. Cell phones, detectors. In a residential setting, it's the sheetrock. It's given us that opportunity to get in there and do some work, whether it's truss building or not. And I think that's the mindset that now goes with going to a fire. That as long as it's not, front to back, top to bottom, that we look at it and we go, well, that's a couple of rooms, and the drywall is going to help us. And the other thing is that once you flip the narrative and there's a lot of fire, a lot of places won't go to the roof, right? So it's that in-between fire that we have to be aware of. I like people that say, if I'm on a truss roof, I'm going to bring a roof ladder with me. So I always ask, so what's the purpose of having a roof ladder? Well, distributing the weight. Okay. So what's it also supposed to do? How long should it be? Well, if you look at the original books on roof ladders, it's supposed to go from the ridge pole past the outside wall. So if the roof decking collapse, you're supported. Well, what's not in a truss house? There's no ridge beam. So all you are is hooked on part of the sheathing at the highest point. That's probably going to fail first. So we always kid around, you know what? I go to a ranch style house, 4-on-12, walkable roof, decent amount of fire. Get up there, cut, get back down. If it's not in the attic yet, but you think it's getting there, just do that. Instead of, got to get this ladder, got to get a roof ladder, let me start the saw, make sure it works, let me get my axe, let me get this. No, get up, cut a hole, and get back down. You always have to mention the type of fire. What does it look like when they pull up? What is the culture of that particular fire department? Some places are going to go on the roof regardless. I always, I have friends in California, so I usually say this to them. But I said, if there's an outhouse on fire in California, there's a truck on top of it trying to put 3 holes in the roof. And back here where we commit the entire first due truck to search in a private house, it's just a different of philosophies. But that's the thing I think that really impacts on that decision to go to the roof. How much fire is it, and what is the culture of your fire department? Can I operate out of the bucket? Can I operate off an aerial ladder? Is it a truss? Is it an old house? All things that you talked about size of, all things that have to be done pretty quick as you get there to give you the best opportunity to perform that the fire and the building are going to let you.
I think it's important, too, that we stress getting a firefighter to the rear of some of these private dwellings. If they do have a walkout, see if the fire's in the basement, because we have these truss floors now. Engine company pushing in, you have a good basement fire, you don't realize it, and next thing you know, the floor gives out.
Yeah, and we've had a lot of conversation about that also, with the first line going to the rear. The OV calls, got a walkout basement. Does the first line go to the rear? And I said, unfortunately, no. Where's the first line go? First line goes out the front door protecting the stairs because the truck hopefully is upstairs doing their search, right? They've been able to scoot up and they went over portable ladders. That's their only protection. If the fire burns through the basement door or there's some kind of collapse and the first floor takes off, it's going to go right up the stairs to where they are. So it sucks, but you don't get the fire. Brownstone fire, right? Yeah. First line goes to the parlor floor to protect the rest of the building. Not sexy at all, not a lot of fun, but someone has to protect the truck. That's the mindset. It's the discipline of a good engine company. Yeah, we're going to hold the front door.
And it's important, too, if you are operating and you're searching on that main entrance and you do come across the basement door, make sure you close it and secure it.
Yep.
Let everyone know you have the door closed, right? Because you're buying the truck time. This is why positioning is so important. And that's what separates, I feel, what we do and what we understand about the fire service a little bit differently than others because of our positioning-oriented job is that it is so strict.
You can have all the rules in the world, but if there's no discipline, they don't matter. So we're very fortunate. Yeah. New York City has a stack of books, from studying, but you're held to those. The roofman doesn't stop off on his way to go check the third floor apartment. If he does, he probably won't get the roof for a while. The discipline of holding your position and doing your job, that's the important thing. Giving up a good basement fire because you're holding the first floor, no one wants to do that. But that's what the good engine does. If they can't get down the stairs, they protect the first floor and the truck wherever they're searching.
So if you were to rewrite this article, again, Roof Operations, Layaway, Trusses, and Variations, published June 1st, 1997 from Fire Engineering. If you were to rewrite this today, what were some of the things you would add to it from just what has changed in the fire service and what has developed from 1997 till today?
So that's kind of a tough question because you know me. The basics are always going to be the basics. I'd add some more about the failure of trusses. I talk about glue trusses. I talk about wooden I-beams, which really didn't talk about back then. There's several tests that were done by different departments, individuals. I'd probably put some of that in there. But the awareness of when to operate on them, trying to get people to understand that. What is the fire load? What does it look like on arrival? What type of building? Do we know it's lightweight? Has this fire been burning all night? So there's stuff like that, but really, most of what's in there, I'd probably just put that and add a few things here or there.
Now, truss roof, lightweight, whatever operations, just talk roof firefighter tactics. What's the biggest mistake you're seeing from young firefighters today when operating on the roof?
A lot of times they don't open anywhere near the fire. They've determined it's safe enough to go up there. They're going to make some kind of a hole. So the safest place to make it is right at the front of the building where they came off the roof. I've gone to a couple of fires where on peak roofs, send a truck up to do the exposure roof. Fire building, it's already starting through the roof. So, go up, give me a hole in the exposure. So where would you put it? Do you put it on the wall right next to the fire building? Or do you put it on the other end? And they put it on the other end, so if the fire does get through, it now goes to that vent hole. So it's all where they're comfortable. Instead of putting it alongside the dividing wall, where if it does break through, it's immediately going to show itself, They don't want to get that close to the fire, so they operate 20 feet away, and they put a hole that's going to draw the fire to it. So you have to determine where the fire is. If the fire's not showing out the front windows, or it's pushing out the back very good, you got to start at the back. If you're unsure, at least pick the middle of the building, so maybe the public hallway or the top of the stairs will clear out enough to give the engine that point of attack. We always talked about fires in Cape Cods. Fires getting a knee wall, they're terrible. You can't get down that low. You can barely get a hole. Put a hole over at the top of the stairs. Now the engine can at least get to the top of the stairs, have a little bit of relief. Then I got to get the knee walls, which is a whole separate thing. But the first hole, if you can get it there, the engine can at least get a vantage point to operate from.
All right, Bob, wrapping this up. Young firefighter gets a fire tonight. Pulls up. The officer says, go to the roof, see what we got, get me a hole. What are some of the key points you're looking for to this? When you get to the roof, take me through the steps of what you would do if this was your fire.
So you have to go with the first thing is when the officer tells you get to the roof, right? I'm going to look at the roof. What's showing from this building? That's a part that everyone, not that they leave out, but it's not emphasized enough. What kind of smoke is showing from the building? What kind of fire is showing from the building? I talk about townhouse fires quite a bit. If I pull up, most of my townhouses are 20 foot wide, 30 feet deep. If I have heavy smoke showing and no fire, where's the fire? The basement or the rear? If it was in the front room, I'd see it. I don't need, if I have a glow over the back of the roof, the fire's showing out the rear. So what do I see as the roof man from that position? Let's say I'm taking a bucket up to the roof. I get up to the roof, I'm looking at that building. When I get level with the roof line, is there anything pushing out of the siding? Is the smoke coming around the window frames? Is it pushing out of the siding? Is there any indication that the fire's already got to the cockloft? Let's say not. Get up on the roof, right? So another great one, sounding the roof. What are we sounding for? I don't know what it sounded like yesterday before it caught on fire. So I don't know what I'm listening for. Is it the Jeopardy clock? So yeah, the only thing you might want to do is try to figure out which way the rafters run or the trusses run, so you're stepping on wood instead of decking. A little bit substantial. I get up out onto that roof. What are my roof features? Do I have a scuttle? Do I have a skylight? Is there anything showing? Is there any indication as I get on the roof that this fire has already gotten into that cockloft? If the roof is good or feels good, I will try to get to the rear quickly and look over the back. See if what I see back there matches what I saw on the way up from the front. Also might indicate if someone is trapped back there. If that's good, no one's trapped, no more indications, I go back and try to get any natural openings. If there's no natural openings, I'm monitoring the handy-talkie. What are the crews telling me? We're on the second floor, we have a good fire in the rear. Well, are you on the second floor and this is 3-story? Or are you on the top floor and you got a fire? If they have a top floor and it's a fire, I'm going to start the cut. So that communications, listening to the radio, being able to take their information plus what you saw front and rear and trying to find out what your tactic is. If I put my saw blade in and fire starts to vent through there right away, I'm probably going to attempt a much quicker hole. Might only be 2 by 2, depending on if the fire's being forced through my curve or just starting to lick. Again, how long has the fire been up in there? That's kind of a quick synopsis. The building's going to tell me what I can get away with. Looking at the front, looking at the rear, and then what are the communications telling me?
All right, Bob, well, I appreciate your time once again and your wisdom. I think we need to do this more often. There's so much knowledge being shared, but it's all about the basics and mastering the basics. And I think we've overlooked this in today's fire service. We're so quick to talk about steps 1, 2, and 3. You and I, we talk 1, 2, and 3 still, but there's people teaching 10, 11, 12, but never mastered 1, 2, and 3. We got to get back to 1, 2, or 3 and really hone in on what that is for today's American fire service and get on the same page as well, because as much as firefighting is local, those steps are pretty sound across the country, and I think we have to get back to that.
I agree 100%.
All right, Bob, again, thank you very much, and I'll talk to you soon, all right, buddy?
Sounds good.